Hello, ladies, and welcome to another episode of the Autoimmune Rehab Podcast, where, as always, you can find show notes and listen to all the full episodes in the archive at autoimmunerehab.com. Today's episode is going to be a solo episode, so I'm not going to have a guest with me, and I'm going to share with you all about gluten-free diet plan for beginners, how to stick with a gluten-free diet without giving up your favorite foods. Because this is something that I hear a lot about when people first find out that they need to go gluten-free, is that they feel like they're going to have to give up a lot of their favorite foods, or possibly it's going to cost too much money or be too big of a hassle. And these are some of the obstacles that people come across when they're just barely getting started going gluten-free. So what kinds of things am I going to share in today's episode? Well, first of all, I'm going to start by talking with you a little bit about why gluten-free is a must for thyroid and autoimmune challenges, and why gluten-free is not only for celiacs. That's actually a myth that is out there. And then also talking about developing a why, having a little bit of a change in your attitude and perspective, talking about my personal story with gluten-free a little bit, and then giving you some advice and tips on how to get started with the gluten-free journey, and then how to stick with it, and how to do it successfully, how to do it in a way that is healthy, because there is a lot of gluten-free junk out there, and then also giving you some advice on how to continue to thrive while living the gluten-free lifestyle. Okay, so let's get started first off a little bit talking about why going gluten-free is so important for your thyroid and other autoimmune conditions in addition to celiac disease. So celiac disease, people are aware, is where you absolutely must give up gluten 100% of the time, avoid cross-contamination. You just really cannot have gluten because of the damage that it does to your gut and your stomach. And some studies have even said it can increase stomach cancers and all kinds of other things if you eat gluten. Now, that said, there is a myth out there that says that gluten-free is only for celiac disease, and gluten can also help attack your thyroid, make your thyroid worse, can cause all kinds of other autoimmune problems and symptoms. And that said, it is true that in some cases you may be able to tolerate a little bit of gluten, like you may not need to worry as much about cross-contamination, or you may be able to have things like sourdough bread because it's fermented, or if you go like on a trip to Europe, you may be able to eat a couple of croissants in France that are not gluten-free if you are not celiac. That said, you really should do your best to stick to being as strictly gluten-free as possible for at least a couple of years, is what I tell people. And personally, as of the date of the recording of this podcast, we are coming up on or around the 10-year anniversary of the time that I went gluten-free. And I have been strictly gluten-free more or less for 10 years. Last year or so have had some sourdough bread a couple of times, and in 2019, the last time I went on a trip to France, I did eat a few croissants and things that were not gluten-free. But other than that, I really have been really strict about it. I've been very, very careful when I eat out, all kinds of things like that. And I really feel like this has helped heal my gut and my digestive system and my thyroid, and has made it so that now if I do get cross-contaminated or have a little minor amount of gluten, it's not as big of a deal. But in the very beginning, you want to be very strict for at least a couple years. I do also recommend that you get tested for celiac disease, because it is very possible to have celiac disease and also have lupus and or have Hashimoto's or Graves' disease or other things like that, because a lot of autoimmune disorders will come in pairs or even in threes. And so you want to make sure that you know exactly what you're dealing with and whether or not you actually have celiac disease or not. I personally did not get tested before I went gluten-free 10 years ago, and that was a big mistake. I feel like I should have, because I'm pretty sure I'm not celiac. It really would have helped. And, there are just some things that it would have been nice to have known if I am actually celiac or not. Okay, so that's enough on that. So then the other thing that I want to point out that is really important for a successful gluten-free diet plan for beginners and how to stick with gluten-free without giving up your favorite foods is to have a change in attitude and perspective, and to realize that not being able to eat gluten is not the end of the world. And to also develop a really severe why, and a really strong why that says, hey, I'm doing this for my own health and well-being, and this is just something that I need to do. And also realize that we have a lot more options for gluten-free than we did even 10 years ago when I went gluten-free. So I've talked to some people and known some people who had celiac disease who have been gluten-free in some cases for 30 or 40 years. And it was really, really difficult back then. And even, like I said, 10 years ago when I first went gluten-free, it was pretty tough. But nowadays, there's a lot more options than than back when I started. So to give you an example, when I started, there's wheat flour in licorice is one of the things that people sometimes don't even realize it. But there was no gluten-free licorice. Like, you literally could not find it. And now is gluten-free licorice that is available. Now it's still a lot more expensive. It's not as mainstream, that kind of thing, but it does exist and you can get it. And the same thing could be said about a lot of other things. And there's also been a real awareness about things like gluten in medications and supplements, and a lot of companies that in the past have added gluten to a lot of things have started taking it away and putting other things in it. And sometimes those other things may or may not be as good for your health, but the point is there is a lot more options than there used to be. Then the other thing that I want to point out is that in most cases, a lot of the foods that you eat on a regular basis and your favorite foods are probably gluten-free anyway, especially if you're eating a healthier diet. So I know things like cheese, which dairy is a whole nother conversation in and of itself, but cheese is gluten-free, avocados, all your fruits, your vegetables, your home-cooked meats and seafoods, things like that, brown rice. There's an abundance of a lot of different kinds of healthier gluten-free pastas, soups, all that kind of thing that you can make at home are probably going to be gluten-free. Now, yes, some people will say, oh, well, my favorite food is like fried chicken or pizza. Well, there are options for that, but you're right. Those default foods typically do have gluten, and you're just going to have to take a mindset and some prep work to be able to figure out how to get them gluten-free or make them gluten-free and what to do. So then the next step of this that you want to do when it comes to doing this kind of a gluten-free lifestyle is you want to focus on whole foods that don't have gluten anyway. So the biggest problem that a lot of people have when it comes to trying to go gluten-free is that a lot of the foods that they are eating or the foods that they're used to eating are highly processed, come from a package or a can or something like that, and have a lot of added gluten and things in them. Whereas if you focus more on whole foods, single ingredient foods, things like that, there's not going to be gluten in anything other than bread or pasta, which both of those nowadays, you have a lot of options for replacing that. That said, you also want to be really careful that you don't just start consuming to your heart's content all the gluten-free cookies and crackers and breads and things like that, because those things can really cause a lot of weight gain. Those things have a lot of sugars, other things in them that are not healthy for you, even though they may be gluten-free. And so along with that, potentially consider trying to learn how to make some of your own gluten-free foods. Now, gluten-free bread, I know, has come a long way in the last couple of years as well. There are ways that you can make your own gluten-free bread. I have some recipes and things. That's not something I've personally tried yet. And, I don't know that I'm going to, especially now that it's been 10 years and I feel like I can handle some sourdough bread. I probably won't try making it, but there are options out there. And so, yes, it is work. Yes, it's going to cost some money in the beginning, but you can do it and realize that your health and wellness is worth it. Then the other thing you want to do is to search for gluten-free restaurants, and there have been coming on the scene lately more and more that will have a separate fryer for a lot of things, or in some cases, they'll even be completely gluten-free. Like I know here in Salt Lake City where I live, it's a restaurant and a bar, but it's called Zest Kitchen, and they are completely gluten-free and vegan. So they don't have any gluten or dairy products or meat products in their kitchen or facility at all. And they make some really amazing pizza, all kinds of really good foods. And so if you search those out, you definitely can find those. And a couple places to find those. So one thing would be like Facebook groups will have really good ideas. For example, there's a Gluten Free Utah Facebook group that I'm a member of that has things on restaurants, also has even bakers and things that have learned how to make different gluten-free breads and goods, and all kinds of resources. You can ask for help, tons of ideas, and you probably will find that there's one for your state or your local area as well. Then the other thing is you can do apps like Find Me Gluten Free or Yumly, and just play around with the different recipes, things like that. And then Thrive Market is also an option for ordering a lot of gluten-free foods, and there's even a filter on there that lets you choose the foods that it displays, and you can even shop where it doesn't even show you any options that have gluten. So, there's a lot of different options out there. And I think the biggest couple pieces of advice that I would have for you is, if you're on this journey of beginning the gluten-free lifestyle, this is not something that you've been doing, but it's something that you're transitioning to and you realize that you need to do it, is, for one, just give up all the gluten to begin with. You don't want to try to just do it in phases. Just realize you're just going to have to step in and go gluten-free. I know personally, for probably about a year before the last 10 years when I have been gluten-free, I was kind of on this roller coaster of where I wouldn't have gluten for like a month or two, then I'd eat something, feel terrible, gluten, then I wouldn't do it for a couple more weeks and say, oh, maybe I can have some, and so forth and back and forth. You don't want to be doing that. You want to just start some meal planning, get some grocery shopping lists, and just go for it. And have a big why and get some accountability, which is something that I can do as a health coach. So if you would like some help and assistance with accountability, if you'd like to even brainstorm a personal plan for you personally on how you can get started going gluten-free, that's also a service that I offer. So you'll find the link in the show notes, as well as on the podcast website at autoimmunerehab.com, where I can help you out with this. And just do it and realize that it's for the sake of your own health and well-being. And that's another aspect where a health coach, or where some of these gluten-free Facebook groups and things can also help as well, is that we can also give you some recommendations as far as what our favorites are, as far as gluten-free pasta, gluten-free bread, replacements for different things that you may be used to eating. And like I said, there's lots of options nowadays, so there's really no reason to insist on not wanting to do it. Gluten-free bread actually is pretty good, a lot of them. Personally, I will tell you that my favorite kinds are Fran's, which you can actually get a pretty good deal on at Costco, or Canyon Bakery as well has some really good ones, and that's widely available at a lot of different stores. As far as bread goes, as far as pasta goes, I really like just the brown rice pasta that you can either get at Trader Joe's or Walmart. So just to give you a few ideas. And so I hope that you found this helpful. Please do reach out if you are beginning this journey and struggling and really would like some help. I really am here for you and I really love to help you. And thanks for listening, and stay tuned for another episode of autoimmunerehab.com. We have some great things coming. I continue to book new guests that have a lot of different interesting stories and topics, and hope that you will learn from them. Also, I'd really appreciate it if you would at least take the time to go into iTunes and rate this podcast. Ideally, you're going to rate it at least 4 stars, and write me a review if you want. Take care, have a great day, and I will catch you on another episode of the Autoimmune Rehab Podcast.